What actually makes people change and stick with it? Not motivation, not willpower alone. Real, lasting change follows a system, a set of psychological principles that show up again and again in the research. This is the dynamics of human change, an applied systems blueprint that connects foundational psychology to sustained behavioral action. We're drawing on three pillars: clinical psychology, longitudinal personality data, and self-determination theory, to map out exactly how change happens and why it so often doesn't stick. If you've ever wondered what separates a change that lasts from one that fades by February, this breakdown is for you. Let's get into it. To understand how change actually works, it helps to think of yourself like a machine built from three parts. Panel 1 highlights gears turning. First, the engine. This is your cognitive foundation, perception, cognition, and emotion running in real time. It's the machinery that takes in the world and processes it, moment to moment. Without it, nothing else moves. Panel 2 highlights braced frame. Second, the chassis. This is your personality, the big 5 traits that form and solidify through adolescence and early adulthood. It's the structure that holds everything together, distributing load and giving you stability over the long term. Panel 3 highlights rocket launching. And third, the fuel. These are your motivational drivers, the psychological needs and self-determined regulations that ignite action and, more importantly, sustain it. Here's the key idea. You can have a powerful engine and a solid chassis, but without fuel, you're not going anywhere. Motivation is what turns potential into actual, sustained change. In the next section, we'll break down each of these three pillars, starting with the engine. Let's zoom into the engine, the cognitive foundation we talked about, and look at its three moving parts. Highlight perception circle. First, perception, how we interpret the world. This isn't a neutral camera capturing reality. It's an active process, filtered through past experiences, emotional states, and cultural expectations. Two people can witness the same event and walk away with two different stories. Highlight cognition circle. Second, cognition, the information processor. This is your schemas, memory, and judgment at work. It's not just about what you decide to do. It's the mental machinery running underneath that decision. Highlight emotion circle. Third, emotion, and this one's key. Emotion isn't a passive bystander. It's an active participant. It restructures experience, directs attention, and can distort memory. Think about how anxiety can make a completely neutral situation feel threatening. Highlight center overlap. Where all three overlap, you get what we're calling the adaptive human response, the real-time output of perception, cognition, and emotion working together. Highlight outer circle, the social environment. And all of this happens inside a bigger circle, the social environment. None of these three processes work in isolation. They're constantly shaped by the people and world around you. Next, we'll look at how these patterns solidify into something more stable, your personality. Here's something unsettling. You don't actually experience objective reality. You experience a constructed version of it, filtered, organized, and simplified by your brain. Highlight social cognition label left. This filtering process is called social cognition, the mental operations we use to understand other people's emotions, intentions, and beliefs. It's crucial for early development, and honestly, it never stops running. Highlight scattered dots, objective reality. On one side, you've got raw, messy, objective reality. Way more information than your brain could ever consciously process. Highlight the lens, the filter. So it passes through a filter, your schemas. Schemas are mental frameworks built from past experience, and they operate below conscious awareness to quickly organize new information. They're efficient, but they're not neutral. Highlight organized shapes, constructed reality. What comes out the other side isn't reality itself. It's your constructed reality. Neat, patterned, and simplified. Useful for fast decisions, but also where things can go wrong. Highlight system bias callout. One of the most common distortions this filter produces is the fundamental attribution error, our tendency to overestimate someone's personal traits and underestimate the situation when we're explaining their behavior. Someone cuts you off in traffic. You assume they're reckless, not that they might be rushing to an emergency. Understanding this filter is the first step to seeing past it, and it's a big part of why lasting change requires more than just willpower. It requires awareness of the lens you're looking through. Earlier, we called personality the chassis, the structure that holds everything together. But when exactly does that structure actually form? The answer might surprise you. Highlight, left half of chart, ages 12 to 17. This is what psychologists call the cumulative continuity principle, and it's mapped out in this chart. Between roughly age 12 and 17, what we're calling the formative fluidity phase, individual differences in personality are highly fluid. This is the critical window where environmental and social influences have the most power to shape who you become. Highlight, the line's steep climb. Notice how sharply the stability coefficient climbs during this stretch. Your traits are actively setting faster than most people realize. Highlight, right half of chart, ages 17 onward, plateau. Then, somewhere around 17, you hit phase 2, the chassis sets. Stability plateaus. Traits become increasingly consistent as situational experiences stabilize, and the line flattens out through the early 20s and beyond. Highlight, bottom text box. The core idea is called rank order stability. Individuals tend to maintain their relative standing on a trait dimension within a population over time. In plain terms, if you were more introverted than your peers at 15, you're likely still more introverted than them at 25. The takeaway? The chassis sets faster than we think, which raises the real question this series is built around. If personality solidifies this early, how much of it can actually still change in adulthood? That's exactly what we're covering next. Not every trait grows the same way. In fact, personality development follows two very different patterns, and this comparison shows both. Highlight, left chart, the maturity principle. On the left, we have agreeableness, and it follows what's called the maturity principle. From age 12 to 22, both boys and girls show continuous, linear growth. No dip, no setback, just a steady climb. This is driven by continuous improvements in effortful control, plus societal expectations to, essentially, get along with others as we age. Highlight, right chart, the disruption hypothesis. Now look at the right side, conscientiousness and emotional stability. This is a completely different shape. Instead of a straight climb, there's a dip during early to middle adolescence before recovery kicks in later. This is the disruption hypothesis. Highlight, the dip, roughly ages 14 to 17. That temporary regression happens because of a mismatch. Rising external, societal expectations collide with the adolescent's actual biological and cognitive self-regulatory capacity. In plain terms, the world starts expecting more self-control from teenagers right around the time their brains are least equipped to deliver it. Highlight, both charts side by side. So here's the takeaway. Not all traits mature on the same timeline, and not all of them mature smoothly. Some traits build steadily. Others get worse before they get better. If you're in that dip right now, or watching someone go through it, this is a reminder that it's a known, well-documented phase, not a permanent trajectory. Next, we'll look at what actually pulls a trait back out of that dip, and how that connects to the fuel we talked about earlier, motivation. Quick question, do your close friends and siblings actually shape how your personality changes over time? The intuitive answer is yes. The research says no. Highlight, network diagram, connected nodes. This is the myth of co-development, and it splits into two parts. Highlight, initial selection box, left. Part 1, initial selection. Friends do share trait similarities, especially in conscientiousness and extroversion, but that similarity happens during the friendship formation phase. In other words, you didn't become more alike over time. You were drawn to each other because you already were alike. Highlight, independent trait change box, right. Part 2, and this is the real twist. A 5-year longitudinal study tracked adolescents' personality traits over time and found that their traits changed independently from their best friends and siblings. Not in sync, not influencing each other's trajectory. Independent. Highlight, bottom insight box. So here's the insight. Shared environments, parenting, schools, peer groups, don't have uniform effects. Environmental influence is highly idiosyncratic. It lands differently on every individual, even within the same friend group or family. Which means if you're trying to actually drive change, in yourself or someone else, you can't rely on pure osmosis. Hanging around the right people helps set the stage, sure, but it's not what does the work. What actually drives change is targeted, individual motivation. And that brings us right back to the fuel, which is exactly where we're headed next. Quick question. Do your close friends and siblings actually shape how your personality changes over time? The intuitive answer is yes. The research says no. Highlight. Network diagram, connected nodes. This is the myth of co-development, and it splits into two parts. Highlight. Initial selection box, left. Part 1. Initial selection. Friends do share trait similarities, especially in conscientiousness and extroversion. But that similarity happens during the friendship formation phase. In other words, you didn't become more alike over time. You were drawn to each other because you already were alike. Highlight. Independent trait change box, right. Part 2. And this is the real twist. A 5-year longitudinal study tracked adolescents' personality traits over time and found that their traits changed independently from their best friends and siblings. Not in sync. Not influencing each other's trajectory. Independent. Highlight. Bottom insight box. So here's the insight. Shared environments, parenting, schools, peer groups don't have uniform effects. Environmental influence is highly idiosyncratic. It lands differently on every individual, even within the same friend group or family. Which means if you're trying to actually drive change in yourself or someone else, you can't rely on pure osmosis. Hanging around the right people helps set the stage, sure, but it's not what does the work. What actually drives change is targeted, individual motivation. And that brings us right back to the fuel, which is exactly where we're headed next. Last time, we mapped out the full motivation continuum, from a motivation all the way to intrinsic. And intrinsic sounds like the goal, right? Pure enjoyment, completely self-sustaining. So just wait until it feels fun. Highlight, left flowchart. Here's the trap. A lot of behavior change starts external, say, starting to exercise for weight loss or appearance. Then the plan is, wait for it to become fun. But here's the problem. Starting for appearance actually correlates with body dissatisfaction, lower self-esteem, and high dropout rates. And realistically, many people will never find a behavior like exercise inherently fun. Waiting for intrinsic motivation to just show up? That's a trap. Highlight, right flowchart. So what actually works? This is the power of identified regulation. Instead of chasing enjoyment, you operate on the premise of personal value. The shift is simple but powerful. From I have to lose weight to exercise is a key part of my healthy lifestyle. That's not about liking every rep. It's about the behavior matching to who you are. Highlight, right side text, bottom. And the data backs this up. People reporting identified regulation do almost as well as people reporting full internal, intrinsic regulation when it comes to long-term adherence. Highlight, both flowcharts side by side. So here's the real takeaway. You don't need to wait to fall in love with a behavior. You need to connect it to something you already value. That's a much more reliable path to actually sticking with change, and it's something you can act on today, not someday. So we know identified motivation beats waiting for intrinsic enjoyment. But how do you actually build that in practice, whether you're coaching someone else or working on yourself? It comes down to 3 psychological needs, and this table is your practical checklist. Highlight, competence row. First, competence, feeling effective and capable. The undermining move is focusing solely on perfect technique while ignoring how difficult the task actually feels to the person doing it. The supporting move is the opposite. Create contexts where people control outcomes and experience incremental, measurable success. Small wins, visibly tracked. Highlight, autonomy row. Second, autonomy, feeling volition and choice. The undermining move is introject guilt, something like, if it was important enough, you'd do it. It comes across as unsympathetic and controlling, even when the intent is good. The supporting move instead, ask diagnostic questions. Something like, this is important to you. Let's talk about why balancing it with life is difficult. That opens a conversation instead of applying pressure. Highlight, relatedness row. Third, relatedness, feeling connected and appreciated. The undermining move is treating the interaction as purely transactional, a fitness prescription, a behavioral checklist, nothing more. The supporting move is making sure the person never feels socially excluded or out of place in the environment they're trying to change in. Highlight, full table. Put simply, competence needs small wins, autonomy needs real choice, and relatedness needs genuine connection. Undermine any one of these three, and motivation quietly erodes, even with the best intentions. Support all three, and you've built an environment where change is actually sustainable. We've covered a lot: perception, personality, motivation. So let's zoom out and put the entire blueprint back together, phase by phase. Highlight, Phase 1, Blue Panel. Phase 1 is the operating system. This is perception, cognition, and emotion processing reality in real time, the engine from earlier. The actionable insight here: check the individual's schemas and biases first. Before you try to change behavior, understand the lens it's being filtered through. Highlight, Phase 2, Orange Panel. Phase 2 is the hardware. This is the big 5 traits acting as your structural chassis. The actionable insight: recognize that temporary dips in self-regulation, like we saw in the disruption hypothesis, are biological mismatches, not permanent failures. Don't mistake a phase for an identity. Highlight, Phase 3, Pink Panel. Phase 3 is the user input. This is about designing environments for the SDT needs, self-determination theory. The actionable insight: actively fulfill autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Remember the diagnostic framework. These 3 needs have to be built into the environment, not assumed. Highlight, Phase 4, Dark Panel. And Phase 4 is the output, sustained action. The actionable insight: push past external guilt into identified regulation to achieve real, lasting well-being. Highlight, bottom banner statement. So here's the whole blueprint in one sentence. Sustainable human change requires aligning cognitive reality, respecting developmental biology, and engineering self-determined motivation. That's the architecture. Not motivation as a mood, motivation as a system you can actually build. If this series helped connect the dots, let me know in the comments which phase you're working on right now, and I'll see you in the next one.